Wurm Online has now received its largest content update for 2025, and there's some pretty neat stuff and also a few problems. Let's talk about it. G'day everybody and welcome in. My name is Bloody Drongo, and today we are going to be covering off the 18th of September 2025 update for Wurm Online, which has the headline features of Docks and Goblin Camps. Now, we'll lead off with Docks because I think there is probably less for me to say about this at this moment in time. And for those of you who are unsure of what this is, it is a little bit more to it than what the name in of itself suggests. So the Docks feature allows you to build floors outside of house and floor plans from an adjacent floor border into open air and sloped tiles. Each planned floor over a sloped tile or open air outside of a house will have either a stone or wooden support extend to the ground below, or a wooden brace that will allow the floor to be supported by an adjacent wall or grounded support. Once a support has been built, a floor can be built on top of the support, which allows you to plan another floor adjacent to that. Now, I guess the primary driving vision of this is to be able to build, as the name suggests, docks, but it is not exclusively applicable to docks, and I foresee there being a whole host of interesting building decisions that will now be available to Wurm players across a whole wide array of different terrains, whether it be mountainous, hilly areas, whether it be some really extravagant floating structures that now have actual support, whether it is now built in conjunction with the existing bridge feature. There's a whole bunch of really, really cool stuff that can be done with this. There's a whole bunch of cool things that have been brought out in conjunction with this. So it lists these changes here. You can go through in your own time and read all of this if you are interested. But for the sake of brevity, wood types do affect things, and you can, build fences and build stuff on top of these and place objects on top of these and all kinds of stuff. All the stuff you would expect. The other thing that has been done in conjunction with this that you may be interested in is also the Dock Building Contest 2025. Rosalia is the new community manager for Wurm Online, which I don't think I've made a video covering or talking about yet, just because honestly I've not really been super interested in Wurm Online news and happenings over the past probably 6 months or so. I would say I've been fairly out of the loop and I don't know too much about them, and so far it has been an unremarkable and uncontroversial change, but it's nice to see that we have a community manager for the game again. So the community building contest is open until the 7th of November, Friday. So you've got time. If you are watching this now, you've got pretty much all of October to get a submission in. The first place winner will get a 15 silver and 45 premium time reward. Second place is 10 silver and 30 days of premium time. And third place is 5 silver and 15 days premium time. So definitely some appealing rewards there for some of the builders out there in the game. Personally, I haven't really been doing a lot of building in game yet. I will likely go ahead and incorporate this into some of my future builds and future ideas that I have, and I'll likely make some video and content around that at a future time once that becomes relevant. The one that is a bit more in line with my personal interest in the game at the moment is Goblin Camps. Goblin Camps are super interesting to me because this represents, in my mind, a focus and addition in mid to end game content for Wurm Online players. This is not content that is focused towards new players. It is quite difficult depending on the difficulty of the Goblin Camp. It may require you to be very careful as a solo player and do very specific tactics and strategies to be able to manage it, or at the harder difficulties mean that you need to wrangle in the help and support of multiple other players to help clear them. So it's definitely not focused at new players, and it is more focused towards something that is repeatable and is hopefully rewarding to the players who are in the mid game to end game, that have got a lot of invested time and experience and want something different outside of the challenge of just quote unquote challenge of hunting regular mobs and bridge that gap between individual solo hunting and unique slayings, which will take upwards of 10 to 10 plus players. So this is something that Wurm has sorely needed for a very, very long time, in my opinion. If you're unaware, Goblin Camps are an enemy-filled zone that spawn randomly like holy sites or rifts. They present a more dynamic and challenging combat opportunity, featuring several types of goblin enemies, each with their own role and set of combat abilities. Camps consist of a perimeter of damaging wooden spikes, goblins on the ground and in watchtowers, and chests full of loot, and various decorative items that players can take. The items can be taken from the camp once all the goblins have been defeated, or as an alternative, players can attempt to walk into the camp at night, looting items and picking locks while the goblins are asleep. This has a chance, though, of waking the goblins and initiating combat. Goblins will not leave the camps and will only fight players who have entered the camp or recently acted with hostility toward the goblins inside. They spawn away from villages, highways, and other special zones, such as rifts, and will not spawn in areas that are too steep to effectively walk on. They will spawn randomly over time in greater numbers than features like rifts or holy sites, and if not defeated after a long time, the camp would disappear, including all loot and other items. So there is new creature types that have been brought in here. Off the top of my head, there is the Goblin Rogues, the Goblin Fighters, the Goblin Blockers, Shielders, something like that. The Goblin Medics, Goblin Chemists, Goblin Archers, and that's all I can think of off the top of my head. But there's a whole bunch of different roles that these goblins have, depending on their type. So, you know, a lot of them, the majority of them will be on the ground for the most part, but you'll often see, you know, for example, Goblin Rogues will be running around in the back line, not engaged in combat, and they'll be throwing, I think, javelins at you. And then you've got the Goblin Chemists, which will usually be in the towers, and they will be throwing vials of spells at you that equate to like Fire Pillar spells that will do like an AoE magic attack and burn you. And then you've got the Archers, which, as the name suggests, will shoot. So the whole idea, and medics will sit in the back line as well and will heal and do effectively a group heal on the goblins. So we'll talk a little bit about the strategies for taking out goblin camps if you're looking to get into them yourself in the near future, because I have had now the opportunity to clear a couple of these myself, and I've got a few, you know, tidbits of information to hopefully help you in your journey if you are deciding to take on goblin camps yourself. Now, there is some items that are specific to goblin camps, some specific rewards. Now, this is where we start to get into the realm of, in my opinion, some of the problems with goblin camps. So we have spell gems, which are enchanted with a specific spell, allowing the player to cast that spell one time, even if they aren't a priest. This allows the list of possible spells has been curated to avoid anything that might negatively impact the in-game economy. So far from what I've seen, these are spells that are mainly targeted on buffing the player. And realistically, the problem that I see with this is that these spell gems are going to be very, very limited in their usefulness, because one of the problems that Wurm has is already, once you get to like 70 fight skill and you have decent enchanted gear and decent armor and a mount, you're basically immune from just about every enemy in the game anyway. And if you're going to a unique slaying, well, you're probably not going to be worried too much about having the best gear and optimizing for that, because you're not rewarded proportional to the amount of damage you're doing, and you're not rewarded besides participating and sometimes just being in local. So there's no benefit to using these spell gems in solo combat, really, for the majority of players. There's no use for it being used in unique slayings. The only argument I could maybe see it being used for is in things like closing rifts, where you are actually rewarded proportional to the amount of participation that you have in it. But by and large, you're going to have a lot of priests there that are going to be buffing players anyway. So I think the argument there is pretty marginal that spell gems as they are going to be a useful and sought after item. And the fact that they've gone away from adding in spells that are possibly going to negatively impact the game economy. The other way to look at that is we have added in spells and curated a list of spells that are not going to be useful or desirable to people. They're not going to want to buy or sell them. So I think this could have some unintended consequences. With Quicksilver tonics, this one I think is the only piece of loot that seems marginally useful and seems to be very, very rare. So the Quicksilver tonic highlights different types of objects in your field of vision, even if they are far away or behind other objects. Each tonic has a specific type, and depending on its type, can highlight animals, monsters, or resource modes. The highlight effect only shows that something is there, but does not give away what type of creature or resource it is. So it's effectively a ability to have wall hacks for a very, very short period of time. And the issue with this, at least from what I've seen and heard from other players, I've not had a chance to get my hands on this yet in game. As I mentioned, it seems to be very, very rare. But the issue with this is it doesn't tend to last very long. And because worm travel inherently takes a while to get around, if you're wanting to try and hunt for animals in the woods, a 1 minute or a couple of minute buff to kill maybe 1 or 2 creatures that you've located in the woods that you otherwise would just be able to run around and find anyway isn't going to be that useful. And the rarity in which it occurs means that it's not going to really be viable in any kind of repeatable method. So highlighting resource nodes, animals, and monsters, I think is kind of interesting as a concept, and hopefully we'll see some evolution in this and maybe some other ways to get these tonics or to extend the duration of the tonics to make them more useful and more applicable. It's both not good enough and too rare to be really useful and worth considering for most players. It will become this hyper niche thing. The only argument that I could see is maybe it could be potentially useful for trying to locate uniques in really difficult to navigate terrain, but I haven't seen confirmation yet or whether or not it will work on unique. So it's interesting, but I don't know if it is going to be something that is sought after by most players. The other thing that is accessible, and this is probably going to be the most interesting, at least around the launch time until this reaches saturation, is going to be the new item skins. So there's a bunch of new skins in the game for weapons, armor, and also some new decorative items with new torches, skulls on spikes, some logs that you can find, and a few other bits and bobs that are kind of cool. Some of the skins I could see being quite sought after by players. In particular, I think the Goblin Longsword is probably one of the coolest skins that is out there at the moment. And I could see some people really wanting that, especially if it comes in a specific metal type. And the problem with this is that once the people have found Goblin Camps, it's very quickly going to become a point where the market is saturated and there's no longer a particularly large demand for these types of items because there'll just be so many of them. And because a lot of the really useful items that you can find in the Goblin Camps, such as butchering knives or longswords, those are going to be sought after in specific metal types, which means that there is going to be a whole bunch of them that are undesirable metal types as well, and they're just going to get discarded and nobody's going to particularly care. So there's a lot of stuff here that is, I think, in the scarcity of what Goblin Camps are, don't justify the amount of effort it is to find them, clear them, and there's no reason why players would go out there at the moment from the way things are balanced at release. I think long term, it's going to be hard to justify to players why they should be going out to find this stuff. Now, there was a big criticism that if I'd made this video couple of weeks ago when the update first came out, because I would have been a lot more critical of it, because at the time there was a lot of issues with it. There was a few rollbacks that had to happen because of bugs that came up. And fortunately, since then, they have compensated players with some extra fleet bonus and some additional premium time, which I think is the right thing to do, given the huge amount of downtime in there. And the other big criticism that I had of Goblin Camps when this first launched was the fact that it was Goblin Camps were launched and they are super scarce. I think on the first couple of days, I spent around 10 hours of game time searching for Goblin Camps. And it was incredibly hard to find. I had no luck whatsoever. Fortunately, on the 26th of September, they have patched the game, and they have made that Goblin Camp spawn chance have been temporarily increased, and they will return it to normal within a month. And I think that realistically, that is the right thing to do, because ultimately, Goblin Camps have been hyped up and been in the pipeline and has been kind of this crown jewel of the development and something that's been promised for so long. And the vast majority of players have not, and even now with the accelerated spawn rate of Goblin Camps, have not been able to participate and find these Goblin Camps to enjoy the content. I don't know if the team has done the maths of how many people are going to be actively on the servers and proportionally how many Goblin Camps are going to be out there. But in my opinion, if the majority of the player base can't access and enjoy the content, you've kind of missed the mark, especially around launch. So there's a lot of criticisms there that I think that in the rewards, they're not really worthwhile. Some bugginess. I don't know if I agree with the rates. There's also a couple of issues, I think, in terms of how it is structured with the stealing aspect of it. Stealing is a skill in Wurm that is impossible to train up until now if you aren't playing on the PvP servers. And the Goblin Camps represent a way to train stealing on the home servers. But the problem is if you're training from one stealing using Goblin Camps, your failure rate is going to be very, very high. And it falls into what a lot of Wurm skills do very, very badly, in that you are failing so often at low skill that it actually takes a really, 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 really long time to actually gain enough skill that you actually are able to do the skill proficiently to actually start gaining skill. So you have this like really slow thing, and then slow rate of skill gain, and then it accelerates rapidly before dropping off again and slowing down because of the way that Wurm decelerates skill gain at higher levels. And it's very, very backwards. There should be a smoother, gradual decrease in skill gain. It should be easier for me to gain skill at one skill. It should be faster for me to gain skill at one skill to two skill than it is to gain at 20 skill. But right now, you have much better chance of actually gaining skill at 20 skill in stealing using Goblin Camps than you do at 1 or 2 skill, and it's very silly. And Wurm does try to compensate for that by giving you larger skill ticks at lower levels, but not enough. And that is another more niche criticism that I have of the system, but that is not unique to stealing, and that is the same for a lot of Wurm skills. And it's very, very kind of backwards, very old school game design that I don't think is particularly well thought through. The other more niche stuff, before we speak more specifically about strategies of dealing with Goblin Camps, is the new log wall types that have been added. So you have the ability to create log cabins in the woods, which I think is great. There is log, hardwood log, bark logs, and rustic logs, which all look visually different, which I think is great. I am all on board with adding new customization and new options for players to build whatever they have in their imagination. I think it's great. So I think I'm very, very happy about that. There has been a water spring item that has been added to the silver shop, allowing you to make a selected tile a water source for 1 year, which is kind of interesting that it is a consumable. I think this is probably a good change because, I mean, it's quality of life. It's a shame that it's paywalled, and I really would have hoped that there would be a way to kind of, yes, natural water sources exist in Wurm. I have mixed feelings about this because it's not really that different from the transmutation rod that it already existed in the game, where you could create a really high quality vein that you could mine out for, I think it's 10,000 actions, and you could get high quality ore from that. It is a consumable, it's a purchasable item in the game. I don't love it, but I can see the argument for it existing. There's also new things that have been added to the archaeology drop table. Importantly, wagons. I understand this is only template wagons, but it does mean that these are now accessible to, in particular, the northern server cluster, so it's a big deal for them. But it does mean that there is a new way for these wagons and these cosmetics to enter into circulation, which I think is good. They've also done a whole bunch of patches here, none of which I think are hugely relevant to mention in this video. But again, as always, I will make sure to link all of the articles and stuff that I have shown in this video down below in the description of this video if you do want to go through and read them yourself. Now let's talk about specifically Goblin Camps. Now, the important thing with Goblin Camps is that you are going to have to be a bit more thoughtful about how you approach these, and they come in a few different sizes. These sizes are generally indicated by the number of towers in them. The more towers that exist in the Goblin Camp, generally the harder it's going to be. And in the towers, as I mentioned before, you're going to have ranged goblins that are going to be hurling things at you and dealing range damage to you. On the ground, you're going to have your primary fighters, your melee fighters. You're also going to have rogues, and you're going to have medics. Now, if you're approaching this as a solo player or a group player, I think the general strategy that is going to be meta going forwards. Now, this, bear in mind, take this with a pinch of salt. This is very soon after release. This could change in the future. But at least at launch, I think the general meta and strategy to approach this is going to be to focus down the medics first. Have a designated tank to go in and aggro the goblins first, and then send in your DPS to go and deal with the goblin medics. The reason why you want to focus down the medics is because you can have multiple medics in a goblin camp, and they're all going to be healing the rest of the goblins, and it's going to make the fight go a lot longer if you're going to leave those medics alive. Now, once the medics are dead, the next thing that you're going to want to do is get rid of the ranged DPS out of the towers. Stuff like the Goblin Chemist in particular are problematic because they are going to be doing AoE damage, and that can really cause a lot of issues if you have a group of players in particular. And so what you're going to want to do is, while you again have your tank or tanks dealing with the main group of melee goblins, you're going to send in a group of players to melee the towers. So you're going to want to bash the towers with a large maul in particular, and there is a chance once you complete a bash action on a watchtower, the goblins are going to topple out, and then you'll be able to melee them as usual. You can also range them, but I don't think that ranging is going to be viable or an efficient strategy for dealing with goblin camps, just because you are going to have to take off your shield, and the amount of DPS damage that can be done by rangers is actually quite a lot, especially if you're having to do archery without armor, or you're doing it with light armor. It can get out of hand very quickly. Not to say that it's not viable for some players, but unless you have high archery skill, unless you have a lot of high quality arrows, I think realistically the most pragmatic way is to just have people go in and bash the towers, melee them to death. It's going to be more time efficient, it's going to be more resource. Other good ideas would be to help heal your tanks, would be to have low priest on hand or healers on hand to bandage them. And once you've dealt with your ranged enemies, dealing with the rogues in the back line, and then focusing on taking out the fighters in particular is going to be the way to go. The other thing that I didn't mention as well is that goblin camps will target your horses. However, at this stage, as of the time of recording, they will, if you send in somebody first to draw the aggro, all of the goblins will focus on the aggro of the player, and they will not transition their aggro onto mounts. So if you have your tank be unmounted, you can then use disposable mounts to go in and to give your DPS fighters a little bit of extra combat rating to make them a bit more effective in combat. So that's the general, very quick strategies for combat. Stealing and sneaking is quite difficult to do, and you are going to need a couple of skills already at decent levels to make it probably viable. Number one is going to be you're going to need to have decent body control. If you don't have decent body control to be able to stealth and remain in stealth, you're going to have a pretty bad time trying to sneak into goblin camps and steal stuff out of there. Number two, you're going to want to have good lockpicking and good quality lockpicks. Generally, I would say you're going to want to have somewhere between 20 to 50 lockpicking as a bare minimum to make sure that you've got around a 30 to 40% chance to lockpick the gate and the chests that are inside goblin camps. And you're going to want to have 80 to 90 quality lockpicks as well. You can make those actions faster by enchanting your lockpicks, of course, by using Wind of Ages. And you can also steal things off of the ground, which brings in the final skill that we touched on before in this video, which is the stealing skill. Stealing is going to be really, really difficult for most players to do. And for example, I tried to sneak into a goblin camp and do some stealing last night. I managed to steal three items from the camp before I was detected with 70 plus body control. And I think that's realistically purely down to, and with 44 lockpicking as well, down to just purely the fact that I had one stealing. And the fact that it's really, really hard to get skill ticks, and the fact that there doesn't seem to be a reliable or time efficient way to de-aggro the goblins so you can try to sneak back in. It doesn't seem to be particularly viable to get stealing and sneak into camps and steal things out from under them unless you've already got the stealing skill. So just food for thought there. It may be worth something to try, and hopefully they do rebalance it in the future. I will be definitely hoping for that. But yeah, that's the general idea, is sneak in, go around, loot the items while they're sleeping. It has to be at night, by the way. You will be able to tell that they're sleeping at night because they will just be laying flat on the ground with the same animation as a goblin corpse, essentially. Yeah, that's the rundown. I think that's the general high level strategies. Now, if you're looking for goblin camps, the most success that I've had has been looking for areas that have large, wide open sight lines, deserts, tundra, steppe, things like that are going to be the easiest to find. You're going to want to be away from well-traveled areas, away from highways. And despite the fact that the game does say that they need to be a certain distance amount or quite a distance away from deeds, they are occurring closer to deeds than I expected from what the patch note suggested. I think it's somewhere in the region of about 30 to 40 tiles, which is still pretty close. Like, it's well within local and it's well within viewing distance of deeds. So just something to think about as well when you're going out and trying to find them. So I have been trying to map all of the goblin camps that I've been able to find, and I would suggest that you all do the same. Map out where you find goblin camps, both new ones and abandoned ones. And I think it'll be worthwhile doing this in the long term, because that will help us build an understanding of how the algorithm or the data, how the game decides where to spawn them effectively. So I think that's useful to understand. Ultimately, I think that is all I have to say on goblin camps. Good luck if you're going out there to find some of your own. If you have your own tips and tricks on how to deal with goblin camps, feel free to pop those down in the comment section below. And if you found this video useful or insightful in any way, feel free to leave me a comment, give me a like, all that kind of good stuff. We'll have lots of new content for Wurm coming in the coming months. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Happy worming.